Following 4 years of investigations and hearings between 2018 and 2022, the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, chaired by Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, completed its work and handed over its final report to President Cyril Ramaphosa. Since then, systematic corruption has continued to haunt South Africa and undermine the rule of law, with some of the implicated people investigated and prosecuted. But how much does corruption continue to cost the country, and is enough being done to speed up prosecutions? Well, to discuss this further, we are joined virtually by Advocate Paul Pretorius, who is a senior counsel of the Johannesburg Bar and former head of the legal team and evidence leader of the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. Advocate, good to have you. Thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thank you, and happy to be here.
So, when we watched the State Capture Commission, many of us did, and we watched with much interest, thinking that this could be the moment that the tide turns. However, here we are, having spent billions on it, and we're wondering, what did it really achieve? How much has actually been done in those recommendations? Perhaps you can let us in on that.
Well, let me deal with one misconception first, and that's the cost. It cost approximately R1 billion, but as a direct result of the work of the Commission, recoveries from various sources have exceeded 2 to 3 billion. So it ran at a profit. The situation in relation to corruption and state capture at the time the Commission was appointed was urgent. But as you pointed out, it remains urgent. Corruption is endemic, and it is really destroying the fabric of our society. I must point out that the Zondo Commission reported in approximately January 2022 for the first time. What the Zondo Commission did, and its duty was to make recommendations to the President. What the President then did was he appointed the NACAC, National Anti-Corruption Advisory Committee, to recommend to him what he should do about Zondo's recommendations. It was appointed in August 2022. It reported in March 2024, and we still don't know what NACAC recommended. Its report has not been revealed to the public. So it seems that the urgency created by the state of corruption and state capture in South Africa just simply has not been realized. The recommendations haven't been implemented, at least to the extent that they should have, since January 2022, and we're 3 years on now.
Yeah, and that's a worry for South Africans as well, who watch on and want to see justice, because when we try and quantify the amount of money that the country has lost in terms of corruption, it's very hard to put an exact figure to it. And when you try and find, how much it costs, just a little bit of research will tell you, and this was back between 2014 and 2019, a study by Unite for Mzansi estimated that South Africa lost approximately 1.5 trillion rand to corruption during 5 years. Other studies, this was in 2017, basically say that we lose about 73 million rand a day in corruption. I know it's hard to put a cost to it, but the bottom line is that this is an immense drain on the country, and we're talking corruption.
It is, yes. And it's not just the rich and wealthy that might be affected. Poor people are most affected by endemic corruption.
If we look and we see how the public procurement reforms work, because one of the key recommendations of the Zondo Commission was looting through state procurement. What has changed in procurement laws and oversight mechanisms since the Commission?
There have been some amendments to the relevant legislation, but what Zondo recommended was far-reaching. He recommended a national charter against corruption, to which the government and other players would be signatories. That hasn't occurred. He recommended that public procurement be centralized. That hasn't been done. He recommended the creation of a procurement officer's profession, in other words, professionalized procurement. That hasn't been done. He recommended the establishment of a public procurement anti-corruption agency, a permanent body to monitor and deal with corruption in public procurement, which is where much of it takes place. Not all, but some. That hasn't been done. So the comprehensive response to procurement corruption that was recommended by Chief Justice Zondo hasn't been implemented. And it's important to understand one aspect of the Commission's work. The Commission didn't deal primarily with corruption on a case-by-case basis. What it did was attempt to reach a comprehensive analytical understanding of the nature and extent of corruption and state capture in South Africa. So it needs a global or comprehensive analytical approach. And the recommendations were largely aimed at perpetuating that comprehensive approach. And that is the main aspect of the recommendations that has been has certainly not been implemented and doesn't seem likely to be implemented.
And again, this is a big worrying. I mean, because there was also the proposed National Anti-Corruption Agency. And this was exactly, and this was an agency that was recommended that should have full prosecutorial powers. Is there just too much political resistance to this? Would you say that this is probably one of the biggest standing blocks in the way of implementing all of these things?
Well, if one looks at the response, the piecemeal response such as it has occurred to date, if one looks at the time over which these responses have and have not been implemented, if one looks at the failure or refusal to set up the National Anti-Corruption Body, which is essential to keep corruption under the spotlight and under the microscope. If one looks at all that, the big question that is the back of my mind, and I'm sure many people's mind and yours, is why?
Yeah.
Why? That question must be asked and it must be answered.
Can I put a theory through? Is it perhaps that the key enablers of state capture are actually still in power?
That's a difficult question for me to answer. Let's put it this way. The powers that be have suffered hugely politically in the last 5 years, if one just looks at the polls. And one could ask the question, do they want more problems? Or is it enough already? Let me take it no further than that.
You know, we look at the NPA and the Hawks in post-Zondo South Africa, and, you know, they obviously were expected to play a very key role in all of this and to try and implement all of this. But when we look at the NPA and the Hawks, is there also many problems that are still there that need to be sorted out before anything can actually be done?
Well, if you just take the example of the Zondo Commission, firstly, it was independent, very important. Secondly, it was equipped and able to do that, what we term colloquially, the big picture analysis of state capture and corruption. It was backed by technology. It was backed by resources and capacity and expertise. It was assisted by collaboration. It could act without fear or favor. Unless and until the prosecuting authority is entirely independent, as is required by that constitutional court judgment, I'm afraid there will continue to be aspects of investigation and prosecution that are lacking. Firstly, its independence. Secondly, its capacity. And importantly, the focus is on the NPA, which understandably it should be, but it's the Department of Justice that is responsible for the capacitation, the technological advances that are required to equip the NPA, and all other aspects of the NPA work, its funding. And again, the question can legitimately be asked, why does it appear to be struggling? Who is looking at it? What solutions are being sought?
And many point as well, as I wrap this up, because we have run into time constraints, unfortunately, many look to local government and say that, this is possibly now where this is taking place. It has been for a while, but certainly this is a big source of the corruption, and it appears that this is just the way things are being done right now. But my question, and very quickly, if you don't mind, Advocate, how should the scourge of corruption be addressed so that we can actually meet the targets of the National Development Plan of 2030 of a corruption-free South Africa?
It needs independence in the law enforcement agencies. It needs capacity. It needs technology. It needs funding. And it needs a political will throughout the society without any roadblocks or sea anchors against the progress of the fight against anti-corruption.
Advocate, thank you. Thank you very, very much for talking to us. That was Advocate Paul Pretorius, Senior Counsel of the Johannesburg Bar and former head of the legal team and evidence leader at the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, talking to us about the scourge of corruption that still exists here in South Africa.